Part 180. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1796. Of course, compensation is not an option. Medical risks and medical accidents are two different things. Medical malpractice occurs because doctors violate operating regulations and cause unnecessary harm to patients, and everyone has medical risks, which are difficult to avoid. The patient's body is too weak, the patient has too many underlying diseases, the patient's condition develops too quickly, the patient is not adaptable to certain drugs. All in all, the human body is a very complex system. No doctor dares to guarantee that it will be 100% curable, or that there will be no problems 100% of the time. Even the more dangerous the patient is, the more likely it is that problems will arise during the treatment process. If the patient and his family are willing to give it a try and can calmly accept the worst consequences, then the doctor will be more willing to use more radical treatments. Means. The risks are high, and the rewards are also high. If you give it a try, the risk of something going wrong is not small, but it might get better. If medical malpractice should be compensated, it must be compensated, and doctors and possibly hospitals must be punished to serve as a warning to others. However, if even medical risks have to be compensated, then if someone dies, do they have to be compensated? Then the result is probably that the doctor is at a loss and please carry out conservative treatment. Surgery. Using higher risk drugs. Using medications outside of guidelines and treatment specifications. It doesn't exist. We have little talent and little knowledge and don't have the ability. Rather than being troubled by the doctor when something goes wrong, being asked for compensation, being sued, and then being found to have used extraneous means, which is almost certainly considered medical malpractice, it is better to be on the safe side. Doctors also have to protect themselves, right? Gretel had seen many such methods in his previous life. At this moment, are you telling him that he will be compensated for the deaths and injuries caused by medical risks? No way. He seriously explained the difference between medical risk and medical accident to the frost giant Guthreskop. We can keep records of the entire process of your treatment this time, and let all healers and all casters see it. If there are any omissions in the treatment process, and your death is caused by omissions, of course I will compensate. However, if there are no problems with the treatment process and you are unable to survive due to your own illness, I have no reason to compensate and the hospital has no reason to compensate. Otherwise, it will be detrimental to future medical work. The poor frost giant swayed when he heard this, and his eyes were almost filled with mosquito-repellent incense. It's pity that he is just a warrior. Even if he is a half-step legendary warrior, he is still just a warrior. He doesn't understand when it comes to medical accidents, medical risks, medical procedures, medical magic and the functions of the human body. He doesn't understand at all. Isn't this all the business of you spellcasters? Even if I find another healer, if I die, my tribe will probably not be able to find a healer of sufficient importance. Won't he turn to you? Gutierrez feels wronged, Gutierrez is confused, and Gutierrez hesitates. After a long while, he answered hesitantly. I don't understand any of this, but I am the most important fighting force in the tribe. If I die, the tribe will suffer a huge loss. If I don't have surgery, I can still suppress the disease and barely survive for a few years or a few years. That's your own problem, Gretel sighed softly. If you were well, I would come and kill you, and I should indeed compensate your tribe for its losses. But now you are sick and you beg me to help you treat your illness. You couldn't survive because of your illness. I am not at fault for this. I shouldn't have to pay. But, before you found spellcasters from various tribes and treated them, you also agreed that if you couldn't survive, you would have to compensate. Gutierrez still wants to struggle. Greet sounded a little impatient. That's because I took the initiative to seek out patients and took the initiative to put them in danger. I will definitely have to pay them and compensate them if something goes wrong. Isn't that what you're doing here? You're the one who took the initiative to come here, right? But. Gutierrez was on the verge of tears. Gretel stood up and said, "Then let's do it. If you agree to this condition, we will treat it. If you don't agree, then we won't treat it. If you agree, sign, leave a magic mark, record, and video, Leon. You make the arrangements." "Coming." Leon Carlos responded. Gretel waved his hand to him. "Follow-up contact will be left to you. No signature, no mark, no surgery. Gutierrez is gone after all." With a bang, 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 he stepped out of a cloud of earth-shattering smoke and ran towards the northwest. Run towards his tribe, towards the Dragon Clan territory where he is. 20 days later, the frost giant left and returned. Coming with him was a legendary white dragon, who turned into a human form and walked in with a smile. "Hey, Master Nordmark. This relative of mine said that if you treat him, will he be compensated if he dies? If it weren't for the medical malpractice, I would definitely not pay compensation." Gretel stood up and ushered him into the office. As for the frost giant, he stayed in the hall outside, huddled in a ball and taking up as little space as possible. Gretel glanced at the giant through the office, smiled and shook his head. "What, you have something to say?" "Of course I have something to say, he is my dependent." Legend Baelong raised his head and smiled. "In other words, it's my property, and you have to pay it to me first. Of course, I'm not here to discuss with you whether to pay compensation or not. What I'm saying is, hey, how about I sell him to you?" Ah! Gretel really didn't expect things to take such a turn for the worse. Of course, in theory, all dragon family members are the property of the dragon, and the dragon can exchange, resell, or use them for various strange things at will. But buying a half-step legendary frost giant with terminal cancer? Look, you pay a small sum of money to buy him. In this way, if he is cured, you will have a half-legendary thug, and maybe he can advance to legend. If it can't be cured, just kill him and you won't have to pay any more. It means that you just pay the material fee and get an object that you can cut, treat, and toss with at will. Isn't it a loss? Greet didn't know what to say for a moment. Buy patience. Buy a patient to practice with? It doesn't matter if you die, you can just cut it? To be honest, even after so many years in this world, he still doesn't adapt to this attitude. I said, if you act like this, he will be sad, right? He pointed to the frost giant outside. The legendary white dragon smiled indifferently. He is my dependent. He has grown up to this point because he accepted my bloodline. Isn't it right to give everything for me? Besides, if I give him half of the money from selling him, wouldn't it be enough? Gretel remained silent. A half-step legendary warrior who served you all his life was finally sold cheaply. You have to keep half of the money you sell, and only give half to the tribe. That's not how you raise black slaves, right? However, there is no use complaining about such things with the Dragon Clan. Not to mention the self-centered white dragon, even the golden dragon and silver dragon, who are relatively benevolent and kind-hearted, will not take their dependents too seriously. Gretel swallowed all the complaints, thought about it, and couldn't help but persuade. Then he has to agree, right? He will be very sad if he is sold out for no reason. I'll go tell him. I'm responsible. But what would I do with such a giant? Fight? I have enough defense around me. Work. We don't need giants to do light jobs, but we are used to using magic to do heavy jobs. Eat a lot and eat a lot, live in and take up space. Isn't Miss Sarala still without any dependents? Legend Baelong smiled and leaned back. A half-step legendary giant, I will give you 2 female giants, and a tribe will be established. At least, guarding the dragon cave and cleaning the dragon cave, these jobs must have been done by someone. That sounds pretty good. Gretel thought for a while and accepted the kindness of the legendary white dragon. So, Gutierrez's net worth. How about you help me get a child? I'll come find the female dragon, but you won't charge me any money. Make a deal. The next day, Legend White Dragon brought a prime female white dragon to Greet's hospital and asked Greet to help with assisted reproductive surgery. On the third day, Gutierrez's identity contract was transferred to Greet's name. This time, Gretel discussed with Gutierrez again and quickly obtained his agreement. I am already yours, you can do anything to me, do you have to agree with me? Of course, your life is your own, and your body is your own. You can choose to stay as you are, or undergo surgery. If you undergo surgery, sign here. Gutierrez signed obediently. The next day, 10 skeletons were busy around him, and in the name of preparing his skin, they shaved him clean. On the third day, the frost giant had a bunch of surveillance magic hanging on his body and was pushed into the operating room on a flat cart by 4 skeletons. Gretel stepped on a small stool and looked down at Gutierrez. You have a lot of tumors on your body. Let's do it one by one to prevent your body from being unable to bear it. Today, we will clean the abdominal cavity first. Come on, close your eyes, a powerful tranquilizing technique. Gentle magic waves flew out of his hands and landed on the frost giant's head and body. Gutierrez instantly fell into sleep. Greet took a deep breath, raised his finger, and a wisp of cold light came out 2 inches from the tip of his index finger, and stood still. Space cutting, a 2-inch long blade should be enough for cutting skin, even a half-step legendary warrior should be able to cut it, right? Boss, just do it. Yudian was wearing a surgical gown exactly like him, standing opposite him with his hands pricked. On the small cart next to it, a fine gold dagger shone coldly. If you can't cut it, there's me. Legendary warrior, if you can't cut half a step of legend, that's a joke. Gretel. I'll go first. Space cutting can theoretically cut any muscle, as long as there is no targeted magic defense. Hey, why is it so difficult to do surgery in this world? It's a new month. Please give me a guaranteed monthly ticket. Cat is only over 600 on the monthly voting list. Cat is so sad. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1797. Opening the abdomen is easier than opening the chest. At the very least, there is no need to touch the bones when opening the abdomen, and there is no need to grind and saw the sternum, and then use a spreader to open the sternum. It's a half-step legend, and it's a giant's half-step legend. Gretel really doesn't know what kind of expander can open the sternum. Is the material really strong enough? Fortunately, you can think about this kind of thing after a few days, or you can throw the problem to the alchemists and let them create something suitable. Now, Gretel only needs to concentrate on opening the abdomen layer by layer. Hook. Pull hook dash. 6 dark gold skeletons stood up, 6 fine gold hooks were placed on both sides of the abdomen, and they worked together to pull back. For this operation, 2 necromancers alone were prepared specifically to control the skeleton retractor. Fortunately, the necromancer can stand back, stand next to the wall of the operating room, and use a high stool to ensure his vision. It is more convenient to disinfect the skeleton. Otherwise, the disinfection work of this operation will still be very head-scratching. I am afraid I can only rely on the immunity of the giant. The skin was incised, the rectus abdominis muscles were pulled apart, and layer by layer, the cumbersome peritoneum was revealed. Greet immediately frowned, pointed, and said to the therapists watching the operation, "Look, this is metastasis. The lymph nodes are swollen one by one. There is a high probability that the cancer cells have metastasized. In this case, We have to clean up all these lymph nodes to prevent metastasis and recurrence. He took matters into his own hands and cut out a few lymph nodes. The necromancer held them in a floating saucer and went next door for pathology. These necromancers, now forced by Gretel, are already good at pathology. Of course, they did not suffer a loss. One of the signature spells of the necromancy system, Corruption Cyst, which can hurt people at least and control the enemy at worst, was stuffed with various pathological cells by them. After exposure to these pathological cells, the rot cyst mother body grew happily and acquired various different properties. Especially the mother body of the rot cyst that came into contact with the cancer cells grew to an unprecedented size. Although cancer cells have the ability to grow indefinitely, in the past, when cancer cells in the human body grew to a certain size, the internal cells would starve to death due to lack of nutrients. As for the mother body of the rot cyst that introduces cancer cells, it grows long and can grow into a sphere 1 or 2 feet in diameter. Gretel saw that thing in a big jar in the basement, and he didn't want to get close to it from 3 meters away. Looks scary. If this thing explodes and blows up on me, how miserable will my death be? After meaning to cut out a few lymph nodes and pull the peritoneum apart, Gretel went further. Pulling and exposing the liver, Gretel put on gloves and touched it himself. Tisk, this liver is quite hard. At least it was harder than what he had touched before. The livers he had touched before, including pig liver, were all soft, making people worried that they would break if he applied too much force. Gretel bared his teeth under the mask. In the past, he usually rescued people in emergencies, sewing up livers that were cracked, crushed, or smashed. If you can sew it, sew it. If you can't sew it, you have to cut it off. The strength of a healthy liver under the needle and thread is not much worse than that of soft tofu. Cirrhosis of the liver, he reminded himself, this is cirrhosis of the liver. Many liver cancers come from cirrhosis of the liver, first fatty liver, then cirrhosis. When it reaches the stage of cirrhosis, it is not far from liver cancer. He coughed and touched everything he could around the liver. The round ligament is fine, but the deltoid ligament is so hard. He turned back slightly and summoned Anivia, Leon, and a few more hard-working and reliable therapists. Come here, follow my order and touch them one by one. Don't be heavy with your hands. This is the liver. If it's too heavy, if you crush the liver and the cyst, we will all be in trouble. Alas, when he had the surgery, he had to work for the teacher for 3 years before he got this treatment. Touch the liver with your hands, touch the cancerous liver. This is a treatment that can only be received by the disciples who are favored by the teacher and are serious about cultivating them. If the newbie accidentally pinches something or bleeds, the teacher has to rescue him. Anivia walked over almost on tiptoes. Carefully, she stretched out her right hand to touch the liver. Her fingertips were slightly glowing with green light. Gretel quickly stopped her. Don't press the treatment up. The treatment will cause cells to divide and grow rapidly, and cancer cells grow especially fast. If you press up, the tumor will grow out if you are not careful. Ah, oh, Anivia's face turned red, the light of the healing spell on her right hand went out, and she switched to her left hand. The left hand is slightly suspended in the air, about 5 centimeters away from the liver, and the right hand is gently stretched under the liver. Greet said in a deep voice. Are you ready? I let go. 3, 2, 1. Almost holding her breath, Anivia followed Greet's instructions with one command and one movement. After touching the left lobe, she touched the right lobe, and after touching the right lobe, she touched each ligament. After touching them all, Leon Carlo stepped up to take over. Before he could reach out his hand, he showed his eyes asking for help. I am a necromancer. I don't know how to heal. Asking for help, asking for healing skills, always ready to tell the truth. Promote. Greet refrained from glaring at him. In the previous life, there was no complete cure. Didn't we pass it down from generation to generation? Without touching it yourself, without trying it yourself, how would you know what the quality of this piece of liver is, how much force you should use to cut it, and how much force you need to use to tie the knot? 5 healers took turns touching it. During this period, there were many thrills. Gretel used the healing technique with his left hand and the floating technique with his right hand, ready to save the situation at any time. Indeed, he saved the situation 7 or 8 times. The worst one, with a heavy hand, the liver burst into blood on the spot, spraying the therapist in the face. The conjuration healer who touched the liver at the end of the rescue was almost in tears and did not dare to move. Being scolded by Gretel. Just go out if you don't dare to do anything. What are you afraid of? I'll tell you everything. Touch me. According to the structure of the liver, every part and every ligament, let me touch it. There is healing. The treatment can be done at any time and the blood vessels can be sealed at any time. With such a big pocket, what are you afraid of? With treatment skills available, some young and inexperienced healers can also undergo surgery without dying immediately. Yes, you can block the blood vessels first to reduce the amount of bleeding, but one of the characteristics of tumors is it will create many new blood vessels to supply it with blood. Originally there shouldn't be blood vessels here, but you cut them out with one click and brush them, and the 3 new blood vessels will bleed together. The field was covered in blood on the spot. You have to find the bleeding point in a piece of blood, then clamp and suture it, but it is still bleeding faster than the suction speed of the suction device. You haven't found it yet, but you are watching the patient's vital signs plummeting, his heart rate and blood pressure soaring, and the monitor beeping like a ghost. The surgeon who was almost the surgeon would have a blood pressure of over 200. How convenient it is to have a treatment. Don't worry about whether it will promote the proliferation of cancer cells, just stop the bleeding first. It takes a few months to die from cancer, but it takes minutes to die from blood loss. Gretel just started to take the next step. Don't rush to do it now, but summon the tower spirit to project a 3-dimensional light and shadow, showing the shape of the liver. We have scanned it before. It is clear where the tumor is and where the blood vessels are. Logically speaking, before the operation, you should memorize these and be aware of them, but there is something you can look at any time. It's a lot more convenient. Alas, with magic, surgery is much more convenient than in previous lives. In my previous life, where could I have seen a holographic projection while undergoing surgery? At most, there is a film by the bedside in the operating room, which is much worse than a holographic projection. Come on, block the blood flow first. This tumor is close to the left and right branches of the portal vein. During the removal of the tumor, it can easily cause massive bleeding. Let's go from here. First block the left and right liver pedicles. When cutting the liver, you must pay attention to the bile duct. If the bile duct is not connected, bile will not flow into the gallbladder, and it will cause big trouble. Here it is. Here it is. Greet explained while taking action. Disconnect, suspend, block, cut. Close to the tumor site, carefully cut the tumor, place it on the tray and click the knife, and you will see that the cut surface of the tumor is densely packed with cancer nodules. At a glance, it looks like the lymph nodes in a duck's neck are 10 times denser and 10 times stronger, all squeezed together. People with trypophobia will have to hold their breath after just one look. Fortunately, Gretel didn't. While signaling to send the tumor for pathology, he performed a cleaning technique to clean up the remaining blood on the wound surface. The cleaning technique is particularly useful here. It takes away all the accumulated blood and fallen cells. It is much cleaner than using a suction device. The pathology department he sent was definitely the fastest. The necromancer in the next room was quick to complete the pathology and image of the cancer cells. As soon as the light curtain opened, Greet turned to the light curtain and began to perform targeted killing of cancer cells. He carefully cleaned the surface over and over again, trying to minimize the scope of the spell. The surface is less than 1 square centimeter and the thickness is less than 1 millimeter. To kill one layer, cleansing sweeps away a layer of dead cells. Kill another layer and sweep away another layer of dead cells. Scanning and scanning, seeing that the portal vein was close at hand, he concentrated all his energy and prepared the treatment. Kill. Cleaning technique. Healing. Sure enough, he was bleeding. Fortunately, the blood vessel was blocked in time, and there was no direct massive bleeding. The treatment successfully blocked it. Well, the tumor-killing surgery was done again, in case there are still cancer cells nearby. Huh! An icy blue halo suddenly exploded, sweeping in all directions. Greet, the healer in the operating room, was all covered with defensive spells to prevent the frost from freezing, but the surgical instruments on the trolley were collectively attacked. Why does this frost giant still have an explosive ice ring? Please give me a guaranteed monthly ticket, meow 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 meow. Thanks to @PlagueBloodWolf2 for the reward of 1000 starting coins. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 1798. The ice ring passed by, freezing the operating table, freezing the trolley containing the instruments, and freezing all the way to the wall. Fortunately, the ventilator also changed its gun and added defensive magic, otherwise it would be overturned. If the ventilator freezes, this operation is not a big problem. Under the powerful tranquilizer, the patient can still breathe on his own and will be fine. However, the next time is a thoracotomy, which requires temporarily blocking the breathing of half of the lungs. If the ventilator freezes, the patient's vital signs will immediately show problems. In fact, there is a problem now. The guardianship magic is beeping, 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 as if it is urging people to die. Gretel raised his eyes and saw that his heartbeat was soaring, his blood pressure was also soaring, his blood oxygen was still there, but his body temperature was dropping rapidly. 34.1 degrees. 33.8 degrees. 33.2 degrees. 32.5 degrees. Greet frowned, but did not panic immediately. The human body has hypothermia. Mild hypothermia is 32–35 degrees Celsius, moderate hypothermia is 26–31 degrees Celsius, deep hypothermia is 20–25 degrees Celsius, and ultra-deep hypothermia is 14–19 degrees Celsius. When performing complex heart surgeries, as well as surgeries on the ascending aorta and aortic arch, deep hypothermic circulatory arrest is often required. That is, after establishing extracorporeal circulation, the body's core temperature is lowered to 18–20 degrees C, and then the extracorporeal circulation is stopped. After cardiac and major vascular surgery, extracorporeal circulation is resumed to restore body temperature. For a frost giant whose body temperature has only dropped to 32.5 degrees, it shouldn't be a big problem, and he won't die due to low temperature. However, the operation may have to be expedited. This frost giant is struggling so hard. Elder Knox, on Gretel's right, frowned. He feels threatened. He is activating his own power. He needs to increase the intensity of the anesthesia, otherwise he will wake up. Gretel? When the frost giant attacks, will the body temperature drop? I don't know much about this. Elder Knox stared closely at the monitor screen. The seeds in his hand had begun to germinate, sprout stems, and grow leaves. A bud the size of a finger was ready to bloom. However, we have observed this phenomenon in Warcraft. Ice-type Warcraft's body temperature will drop when its abilities are activated, while Fire-type Warcraft's body temperature will rise rapidly. Alas, There are so many things to consider when operating on creatures with strange abilities. For example, if a frost giant's body temperature drops rapidly, you have to consider whether this is because its vital signs are unstable, or whether it is struggling instinctively and preparing to exert force. As a frost giant, what is the lowest body temperature he can tolerate? Maybe lower than the deep hypothermia cycle of humans? Then strengthen the anesthesia, Greet shouted in a low voice. Elder Knox nodded slightly, and the flower bud on his fingertips popped open with a pop. Immediately, a small whirlwind swept the air around the flower and poured it into the frost giant's nose. Gretel. He suddenly remembered the joke. The earliest anesthesia was to cover the patient's mouth and nose with a wet sponge soaked in ether. The ether evaporated and the patient fell to the ground. However, ether is not restricted to volatilize in one direction, so that the patient fainted, and the surgeon, assistants, and nurses were also a little dizzy. In this world, fortunately, there are small cyclones that can inject anesthetic gas directly into the patient's nasal cavity. If this flower were allowed to bloom freely in the operating room, how many of the healers on site, including him, would fall? In short, after the flowers bloomed, the frost giant seemed to be much quieter, and even the monitoring magic did not continue to call the police. Gretel glanced up. Thank God, his body temperature no longer dropped. Of course, it didn't rise so quickly either. The operation continues. He breathed a sigh of relief, and then used the targeted cancer cell killing technique to clean the entire liver. Then, it guides the wound to close, the incision to close, the blood vessels to close, the bile duct to close. Completed. Next target, the intestines. Everyone, please note that colon tumors can easily cause intestinal obstruction. Although the intestines have been cleaned in advance, we still have to be careful. In an instant, everyone began to add bubbles to themselves. Filter clean air, absorb odors, and prevent yourself from smelling strange smells. Intestinal obstruction. Intestinal obstruction can lead to constipation, and feces that have been lodged in the intestines for many years are particularly difficult to come down. Although the frost giant drank a large amount of laxatives and performed enemas in advance, who can guarantee that the feces will be cleared? When the belly was opened, the stench hit our nostrils, and it was all them who were smelt. Defense completed, start. The second image was released, which was about intestinal tumors. The intestines, which were thicker than Gretel's arms, were coiled in his belly like a giant python. Gretel didn't rush to start talking, and raised his voice. Everyone, please note that the first principle of surgical treatment of colon cancer is comprehensive exploration, from near to far. The liver, gastrointestinal tract, pelvic floor, peritoneum, related mesentery and major blood vessel lymph nodes, as well as the status of the organs adjacent to the tumor must be explored and recorded. Teacher. Didn't you scan it with magnetic resonance before? Anivia quickly raised her hand. Greet nodded. It has indeed been scanned, but scanning cannot replace visual exploration after abdominal dissection. Remember one sentence: people's hearts are separated from the belly. Your eyes, your hands, and your mental power will always be stronger than the cold ones. Equipment to discover more. Next, I say, Leon, please remember. The liver has been explored, and we started from the stomach. No metastasis was found in the stomach, periintestinal lymph nodes, omentum tissue, appendix. The next operation begins: cut the gastrocolic ligament, expose the superior mesenteric vein, dissect the ileocolic vein, dissect the ileocolic artery. Leon Carlos remembers sweating profusely. Gretel sighed softly. In fact, if it were a tumor of this magnitude in a previous life, there would be no need for surgery. Colon tumors invade too many places. According to colon cancer surgery, a section above and below the tumor location must be cut off, leaving the patient with a short healthy intestine. The shorter the intestine, the worse the function and the worse the healing. If the healing is too poor, it will be very difficult to absorb nutrients or defecate, and it will also affect the patient's overall recovery. But this time, with the spell, I wanted to give it a try it in a way that would be less disruptive to the patient. Blood flow blocked. Start dissecting the colon. The scalpel sliced gently. The translucent, already somewhat edematous colon burst open like a ripe watermelon that had encountered the edge of a knife. The yellow, black, semi-solid, semi-liquid existence immediately jumped out. Cleaning technique. Cleaning technique. Cleaning technique. Crack. Damn it, the ice ring exploded again. The result this time was that all the solid feces and fecal water in the dissected intestines were frozen together with the intestines. Greet really didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He had no choice but to give Elder Knox another wink, asking him to continue deepening the anesthesia. Leon Carlos was then instructed to record. When treating high-level patients, always pay attention to their instinctive spells, pay attention to counteracting these spells to prevent them from going crazy and causing harm to themselves. As he spoke, he was careful to break the ice and, most importantly, not to have a negative impact on his intestines. Then, continue. Emma, the cleaning technique is so useful. Gretel looked at the empty bucket being filled with foreign matter from the corner of his eye, and breathed a sigh of relief. In my previous life, I had to attract attention, be careful of fecal matter in the intestines contaminating the abdominal cavity, and rinse with antibiotic saline over and over again, which made me sweat profusely. Among my colleagues at that time, there were two colleagues who had completely opposite opinions and were at loggerheads. One insisted on bowel preparation before colon cancer surgery, on the grounds that he could save less stool. Another insists that bowel preparation is not required for colon cancer surgery. The reason is that since intestinal obstruction occurs anyway, enema can easily cause intestinal edema, and dry stool is easier to deal with than wet stool. No matter how easy it is to deal with, it is not as easy as the cleaning technique. With one sweep of the spell, things that should not exist and were defined as garbage disappeared in an instant. Gretel moved quickly and completed a period of intestinal cleaning work, exposing the cumbersome and rumbling intestines. He sighed and pointed at the large and small lumps in his intestines. Everyone needs to see clearly that these are intestinal polyps. They can easily become cancerous. If the cancerous polyps do not invade deep into the intestinal mucosa, an endoscope can be used to extend into the intestine and be removed, if the cancerous polyps invade into very deep places. As he spoke, he began to peel off the tumor bit by bit. Therefore, it is necessary for older people or high-risk groups to undergo regular colonoscopy examinations. If a polyp is just a polyp, or a polyp that has just started to become cancerous, it can be easily removed by colonoscopy if it is discovered. If it is removed, it will be fine. If it grows very large and reaches deep into the intestinal mucosa, then the intestines may need to be cut. We now have targeted killing of cancer cells. After the polyps have invaded very deep places, we can carry out targeted killing and then allow the intestines to heal. In this way, we can save as much of the intestine as possible and improve the patient's prognosis. A little better. If you can keep a little more, keep a little more. With one click, a 20 to 30 centimeters long section of the intestinal tract along with the tumor is removed. This is very convenient and the doctor saves surgery time. But, can't we cut off the intestines first and then use limb regeneration to grow the missing intestines back? Anavia raised her hand and asked. Gretel was silent for a moment, nodded and smiled. This is also a method. But Anavia, the limb regeneration technique is a 7-ring magic. If you only kill cancer cells in a targeted manner and use the healing technique to heal the intestines, at the lowest level, how many levels can you reduce the magic to? If the understanding of cells is deep enough, the second ring is not impossible. In this case, even in a small city, the elders of the local nature order can stand up and perform operations for cancer patients. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 1799. Removal of intestinal tumors. Clean the lymph nodes near the intestines. Dissection of para-aortic lymph nodes. Remove all visible metastases from the abdominal cavity. Finally, the inside of the abdominal cavity is carefully cleaned using targeted killing of cancer cells. Clean along the lymph trunks, along the blood vessels, along the organs, along the peritoneal surface, along the pelvic cavity, and along the various organs around the intestines. Rinse with antibiotics and normal saline, rinse, rinse again, and finally heal the abdomen. The entire operation, including the operation and explanation, lasted a full 4 hours. After closing his abdomen, even though Gretel was already at level 18 and his body had been trained many times, he couldn't help but hammer his back with the backhand. Well, actually the pain is not to this extent, but the sense of ritual is still needed. After the operation was completed and the anesthesia was lifted, the frost giant Gutierrez jumped up and almost hit his head on the roof. Gretel quickly used a soothing technique to quiet his hot head, and then took him out of the hospital. Come on, feel how you feel and how the situation is. Don't exert too much force. There are still many metastases in your chest, your bones, and they haven't been cured yet. Before he could finish speaking, the frost giant roared and jumped up. Gretel had a dull face as he watched a ring of ice that was much more magnificent than before bloom from his body and hit him. Then, it was resisted by the defensive magic on his body, pushed away, and disappeared naturally like a breeze. Gutierrez smiled at him, turned around, lunged, twisted his waist, and punched. An explosive roar. A circle of ice blue air waves bloomed from the front of Gutierrez's right fist, spreading forward and outward. Aren't you in the advanced stage of cancer? Why can you still do such strenuous exercise? Gretel was stunned. Fortunately, Gutierrez then let out an ouch, sat down on the ground, and held his chest tightly. His chest rose and fell violently for a while, and his face turned red first, then pale, and he was obviously very uncomfortable. It took him a long time to catch his breath. He coughed several times, twisted his waist and pressed his belly. He lowered his head and gave Gretel a big smile. It doesn't hurt anymore. At least there's no pain in my stomach anymore. Ouch. Gretel looked up at the frost giant who was sitting on the ground, almost as tall as two of him, with a look of weakness on his face. Take it easy, the tumor in your chest has not been removed, and the ones that have invaded the bones have not been removed either. You use force, your lungs, your chest, your here. As he spoke, several mage tricks flew out and painted a few bright red patches on his crotch, thighs, and even the lumbar spine behind his back. There are problems here. If you use too much force, you may break your body. Alas, the bones have been eroded to this extent, why can I still exert force and punch so hard? He. Gutierrez looked at Gretel and just smiled. Although he has been sold to Gretel by his master, whether he lives or dies depends on the other person's wishes, but who really wants to die? Seeing that the pain in his stomach disappeared after the first operation, he had a little more hope for the future. Maybe it can really be cured? He is only 120 years old this year and has not yet reached the age of aging. If he is really cured, he might be able to become a legend. Don't laugh like this, Greet said with a big head. The remaining tumors will become more and more difficult to treat. When I treated you today, your frost power exploded twice. In the future, it will cut into the lungs and important bones. I don't know how many times it will explode. Hey, can you control it? If I were sober, I could control it. Gutierrez was embarrassed. However, during the operation, the first step is to let him fall asleep, and he doesn't know how well he sleeps. High-level warriors have their own acumen. Even if they are half-legendary, they will be immediately alarmed if someone comes to kill them with a knife while they are deep in sleep. Like when he was undergoing surgery, he was controlled by a high-level tranquility technique. He didn't know what was happening, but his body would react instinctively. If you suffer huge damage, the strength contained in your body will instinctively fight back. Otherwise, don't anesthetize me the next time you have an operation, he carefully discussed. I will try to control myself. I know you are doing it for my own good, I will not resist. Don't even think about it, Gretel glared at him. You have to cut your lungs. You have to temporarily block the lungs from breathing. You will never be able to control this situation by yourself. Anesthesia. You must anesthetize. This. Okay, these days, you should rest well and don't practice. If it hurts, just find a healer and let them give you painkillers, Gretel waved his hand to interrupt. I still have to think of a way to control your power. He consulted with Elder Nox, consulted with the healers, and consulted with the necromancers. Discussions came and went, and countless experiments were conducted on the warcraft, but no feasible method was found. The stronger the monster, the stronger its instincts and the stronger its resistance to spells. Unable to control low-level spells, and too high-level spells, Greed was afraid that the surgery subject would be anesthetized to death. Central anesthesia, too much sedation, can really lead to death. With no other choice, Greed had no choice but to contact Sky Dragon City through the Dragon Clan and ask for guidance from the Dragon Clan's high-level healers. The Dragon Clan's response came quickly. Gretel teleported directly from the teacher's mage tower to Sky Dragon City the next day to meet Elder Batista. This time, he was no longer tightly hidden, and had to be placed in a separate empty room and sent someone to guard him when he was placed in the wounded barracks. Instead, he could walk freely in Sky Dragon City and come to the elders freely. Well, when you treat the wounded, how do you control their power? Elder Batista has revealed his original body, which is as big as a hill. Dragon roars fly back and forth around the wounded, and silver light falls down one after another. The red dragon lying on the ground had one wing almost completely torn off, the other wing was obviously fractured, the skin on the two hind legs was torn, and there was a big hole in the abdomen, and the internal organs were clearly visible. The silver light shone down, clashing with the black energy rising from his body, causing crackling explosions. The red dragon whined so loudly that his throat was almost torn. Boss Greed couldn't bear to hear it. What kind of pain relief and anesthesia spells did you use? Pain relief? Just stop it casually and it'll be fine, Elder Batista took the time to answer in his busy schedule. Anesthesia? What anesthesia? How can we perform surgery without anesthesia? Greed stared at the treatment site, watching a powerful invisible force holding the broken wing, pulling it apart, correcting it, and rejoining it. Without anesthesia, he would struggle, which would seriously hinder treatment. Just die if you can't help the pain. Unexpectedly, Red Dragon, who was lying on the ground being treated, raised his head and cursed. The Great Dragon Clan will never be able to bear the pain. Either he can endure it and be cured, or he can't endure it and the cure is crooked, or he is completely dead. Such an idiot has no qualifications to be a legend. Oh. Gretel stared at him intently and found that although the red dragon kept twitching in pain, he really held it back and worked hard to cooperate with the treatment. He didn't know what to say for a moment. So for tens of thousands of years, you Dragon Clan have relied on thick skin and strong endurance to survive, right? Fortunately, Elder Batista understands Greed's needs, or in other words, understands the needs of fragile humans. The same injury, the same pain, the dragons can endure it by gritting their teeth, but humans may pass it by and never wake up. Therefore, while the old man was treating the red dragon, he answered Gretel's question with a smile. So what are your needs? What do you want the person being treated to do? Completely comatose during the operation, not waking up, not resisting, and not bursting with power to affect your treatment? This is simple, temporarily imprisoning his soul, isn't it over? Gretel. No, there is still this trick. I also know a few spells to imprison souls. Although I don't know how to do it, many necromancers know it. There is also the conjuration system, and there are also some magicians who can imprison magic in the direction of the soul. As for what will happen to the body after the soul is imprisoned, how long it will take to have problems and decay, and how to maintain it, these questions can be asked slowly. 7 or 8 ideas flashed through Gretel's mind instantly. Before he could outline the red dragon, lying on the ground groaning, whined, and raised objections. Elder, imprisoning the soul won't work. If you take out his soul, his body will still spontaneously resist, just like the moray eel I caught. The head was cut off and the body was cut into 5 or 6 sections. I can still jump. Gretel. That makes sense. The physical body of the half-step legendary warrior is so powerful, it may really be like a fish out of water, cut into 5 or 6 pieces, and it can still jump. At that time, when he gives treatment, won't he still explode an ice ring and a fireball? Isn't it easy to stop him from jumping? Drain his energy. If you drain him, it will be peaceful, Red Dragon continued to shout. Restraint, extraction, suppression, there are many ways. As long as he is paralyzed there, you can cut it however you want. Well. Greet stood there in a daze for a long time. Finally, he slapped his thigh and turned around like a whirlwind. Goodbye, Elder. Goodbye, everyone. I'll go back and give it a try. He rushed out of the Dragon Hospital, rushed back to the teacher's residence, threw himself through the portal, and reached the teacher's mage tower. Then jump back to your own mage tower and rush to the hospital. Following this idea, let's try them one by one. Energy isolation. Energy absorption. Advanced debilitating rays. Come on, one by one. There will always be one that works. Boss, just do it. Boss is awesome. The healers, especially those of the necromancy type, cheered and went to catch the monsters. The frost giant Gutierrez was left shivering. Boss, how on earth are you going to torture me? Last month, I issued more than 3,000 monthly passes, and 2 of the 4-month passes plus renewals have already been paid off. After 2 more days of hard work, the cat will be free to go see Oppenheimer, meow. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1800. Chapter 1795. The thoracotomy operation is going to fail. The spreader is deflated. The necromancers did not disappoint Gretel. When it comes to healing skills, they are actually not that good. Necromancers are naturally repellent to positive energy, and there is no one in a million that can activate even the smallest scale of healing skills. However, when it comes to playing with souls and negative energy, they are all good players. Imprisoning souls? We can do this. Which one do you want to use? Soul binding technique, this one won't work. This one is used to imprison newly deceased souls. Devil soul pot, this requires the caster to transfer his own soul first, and then control the other party's soul. If the other party is too powerful, it may cause damage to the caster. Soul entrainment technique, this is very good, but it is an 8-ring magic, and it also uses gems. The stronger the creature, the more expensive the gems used. Soul doll, this is an 8-ring magic control spell. You have to ask the magic control department. The advantage is that it does not require gems, but the disadvantage is that it is continuously controlled, and the caster needs to complete the entire operation. The necromancers quickly selected a batch of spells. As for the spells that weaken and absorb the direction of energy, there are more. From the first level Debilitating Ray to the 9th level Energy Absorbing Spell and Debilitating Breath, you can try them one by one. The only problem is Debilitating Ray's conflict with healing techniques. Yes, it will significantly slow down the recovery speed under treatment. Moreover, the restored muscles, bones, and internal organs are not tough enough. The texture is much worse than the original. Is there any way to mitigate these negative effects? I have a way. These monsters basically have magic cores. The magic core is the source of their power, where they store and stimulate energy. Let's use a magic circle to control the surroundings of the magic core, and then do it again. Trying it again, the effect is indeed much better. But then, they faced a second problem. Frost giants are not Warcraft. I've never heard of frost giants having magic cores. Hey, Gutierrez, come on, let's measure the source of your power. The frost giant fought slowly in the center of the circle, slowly exerting force. 5 necromancers stood in a circle, each setting up detection magic to observe the flow of power in his body. Observe and record at the same time. After recording, get together for a meeting. The heart reacts the most violently. I think we should use a magic circle to control the heart. Stop making trouble, that's the heart. You controlled it with the debilitating circle. What if it stops working? It's going to die. It's going to die. Actually, I think the magic reaction here on the chest is also very strong, and this part of the chest is relatively close to the place where the incision is to be made. If it is under control, it is not easy to trigger the magic reaction. The problem is that it's too close. Look, this place is right on the route of opening the chest and inserting the knife. Are you sure that after you control it, it will still be in the same place when the chest is opened? Actually, I think. The necromancers were noisy. Greed walked around a few times, but always felt that their ideas were too strange, and he heard his temples twitching. Hello. This necromancer, don't always think about cutting off nerves. When performing abdominal surgery, the spine is cut off. When performing thoracic surgery, the cervical spine is cut off. When you perform craniotomy, will you have to beat the brain to pulp and then put it back together again? Gretel consulted magicians from various schools such as necromancy, conjuration, and control, and finally decided on a surgical plan based on debilitating rays and supplemented by soul transfer. There is no need to turn on the weakening ray all the time. You just need to do it before cutting the key parts. Suppress the energy of the weakening ray to a small size and aim it at various high energy points on the body. If you block key parts and every key node of energy transfer, I don't believe you can still cause trouble. After this surgical plan was tried on 3 woolly rhinos, a blue ice tiger, and an earth devil bear, it was finally the frost giant Gutierrez's turn. The 5-meter-tall giant once again lay on the operating table, uneasy. I can wake up this time. Don't imprison my soul. The magic of soul confinement is too expensive. I'm afraid I won't be able to repay it in my lifetime. Don't use too much weakening ray. If I become too weak, I won't be able to impact the legend and serve my master. I think so much, but it turns out that the illness is not serious enough. Greed raised his hands and walked into the operating room. In a corner of the operating room, 2 demon dolls were creaking and adjusting a sternum brace made of fine gold. This expander is densely covered with magic lines and charms, and is also inlaid with 2 rows of left and right gems, a total of 12 rice-sized gems. This is what the alchemists made as quickly as possible after getting the custom order, and it can withstand more than 5 tons of pressure. The alchemists summoned a 5-ton steel golem and let it stand on a side-fixed spreader. The spreader creaked under pressure, but it didn't bend, nor was it significantly deformed. It held up for a full 12 hours. What you need to worry about is that too many lungs have been removed, resulting in insufficient oxygen uptake during exercise. How will you become a legend in the future? Greet said leisurely. But there's no need to worry too much about this. Considering the importance of lungs, we will try our best to make them grow well. Speaking of this, Leon, remember, it's time for the necromancy department to open a new topic, cloning. Can the technique be used to clone parts of organs? What? It's like this. Instead of being painful and careful, cutting out the lungs bit by bit, it's better to use his own flesh and blood to cultivate a lung using cloning technology, and then replace it with him. There are also bones, and the bones need to grow. It's not easy. Gutierrez fell asleep after hearing this. Gretel held the scalpel and cut the skin to stop the bleeding. He ligated blood vessels and separated ligaments. He cut the muscle layer along the fiber connections of the pectoralis major muscles on both sides. While cutting, he complained, "Ugh, it's so hard. The chest muscles are really hard." The chest muscles of these high-level warriors who have been trained for a long time are really hard. Hard and big. The giant's huge body allowed his entire upper body to hang on the operating table, and he stretched his arms so that he could reach the midline of his chest. After cutting the pectoralis major muscle, retracting and exposing it, incising the periosteum, paying attention to hemostasis of course, exposing the manubrium of the sternum, and preparing to cut the sternum, everyone held their breath. It's time to open your chest. It's time to open your chest. Ventilator. Don't inflate your lungs for the time being to avoid causing pleural rupture. Pay attention to the length of the space blade. Avoid tearing the pleura. Be careful to stop bleeding at the sternum incision. In the bone marrow cavity, the bone wax to stop bleeding is ready. The mage's hand scoops up the bone wax and follow my orders to apply it. Prepare the spreader. 3, 2, 1. Cutting completed. Weakening ray. Open. Great. No knee-jerk reaction triggered this time. Great. Next step. Wait. The spreader is deformed. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1801. The power of the half-step legend really exceeded Gretel's estimation. 5 tons of resistance is not enough. Obviously, Ming Ming had let Gutierrez try this thing before, making him squeeze it between his fists, push it against the wall, and even step on it with his feet. However, after exerting such great force, the sternum expander still held up firmly without any deformation. However, when it came time to use it, it actually creaked and began to deform. Half-step legend, even if he is anesthetized, even if he loses consciousness, his body will react instinctively, struggle instinctively, and contract his muscles powerfully, trying to push back the sternum expander and return the sternum to its original position. Greet's face also deformed. Although he didn't understand the mechanical structure very well, he also knew that if the spreader was crushed, the protruding parts at both ends would definitely penetrate the flesh. The clavicle, neck, aorta, and trachea above, and the diaphragm, stomach, and liver below. No matter which one is damaged, it will be extremely troublesome. Moreover, are there no blood vessels in the muscle layer? Of course there are, and there are quite a lot of them. Before Greet opened the pectoralis major muscle just now, he had tied off several blood vessels. Quick! Reinforce! Reinforce! He cried out instinctively. Elder Knox stepped forward, and a handful of seeds fell from his hand. They were densely packed and clung to a section of the spreader, and then tried their best to grow forward. The thin grass stems hit the other end and stretched out with all their strength. At the same time, a healer from the conjuration department followed suit. In the low sound of the spell, the invisible and qualityless magic power first attached to the expander, adding a layer of strength to it, just like the sharpness adds strength and sharpness to the weapon. Immediately afterwards, the force field surged up and filled the expander. The necromancer was also very busy, shooting out more than 10 high-level debilitating rays in succession, and the energy-absorbing spell was also ready to go. Can you hold it? If you can't hold on, you'll have to weaken the patient a little more. Fortunately, with the coordinated efforts of these parties, the anesthetized patient finally calmed down, and his muscles no longer contracted and exerted force in waves. Everyone waited patiently for a while, watching the sternum expander no longer deform, and nodded to each other. Elder Nox began to retract the grass stems one by one. After finishing harvesting the grass stems, the conjuration magician carefully moved away the force field to make room for Gretel to perform surgery. Whether it was a scalpel or a hemostatic forceps, there had to be a place where it could go down. This kind of unexpected thing happened at the beginning of the operation. Not to mention Greet's high spirits, even several other healers were a little trepidatious. After all, he had never operated on such a strong person before. Even for treatments, most of them are based on spells, and there are also legendaries, or even more than one legend. Cut the breathing of the right lung. Deflate the right lung, Greet gave the order while explaining to the people around him. During the process of breathing, the lungs bulge and deflate. It is difficult to find the correct position for surgery. It is likely to go to the wrong place at once. So you need to let it calm down first before cutting. Previous examination results showed that the tumor is located in the lower lobe of the right lung. Leon, how many lung segments are there in the lower lobe of the right lung? 5 lung segments. Leon Carlos was shocked when the teacher suddenly called him for random inspection. Fortunately, he had solid basic skills and could memorize it immediately. Dorsal segment, medial basal segment, anterior basal segment, lateral basal segment, and posterior basal segment. Okay, come, look, which lung segment is here? He stretched out his hand and a ray of red light fell, shining on the piled up, deflated right lung. Leon Carlos stretched his neck desperately, even moved his steps, to look carefully, and at the same time compared with the anatomical structure on his back. God knows, the difference between the lungs taken off the back and the lungs seen during the operation is huge. Why is surgery so troublesome? Why is there such a big gap between what I see during surgery and what I see in books? He calmed down, tried to sort out his thoughts, and followed the teacher with his finger. Yellow, white, blue, pink, patches of colors are spread on the lungs. The wizard's trick, this magic, is perfect for coloring various parts and distinguishing surgical sites. It is light, flexible, not easy to get infected, and can be easily corrected if applied incorrectly. As a magician, he also has another advantage, which is to directly use mental power to detect. It is much more convenient to mentally count down the main trachea of the right lung one by one, and count the bronchi one by one to find out which one is which. This is the upper lobe of the right lung, this is the middle lobe, and this is the lower lobe. Then, based on the direction and position, this should be the dorsal segment, and this is the inner basal segment. Greet smiled and nodded. During the operation, it is common for the teacher to suddenly check the student's learning status. If they fail to answer the question or answer it incorrectly, they will often be scolded by the teacher or even expelled from the operating room, and they will not be allowed to follow the surgery next time. Fortunately, Leon Carlos answered well. Gretel simply waved to him. Come on, go ahead and mark the positions of the blood vessels and trachea. With the marks, it will be much more convenient during the operation. You have to be careful here, and the cutting should be slow and steady. The blood vessels eroded by cancer cells are very fragile. Before he finished speaking, a cloud of blood shot out, instantly covering Greet's head, face, and even his entire upper body. Of course, it didn't reach him, as it was blocked by the shield outside his body, but the amount of bleeding was already there. It triggered a burst of exclamations. This amount of blood, if placed on a normal person, would be almost 1/3 of a person's total body bleeding. Even if it is placed on a frost giant, such a large amount of bleeding is very dangerous. At the same time, the physical signs monitoring spell also started to scream like beep, beep, beep. Greet, however, was not in a hurry. With a wave of his hand, a mage's hand condensed into a hemostat, and void appeared, clamping the blood vessel, followed by a healing spell. As the white light passed by, the blood column immediately stopped, and a cleaning technique was used. The blood that had been sprayed out swirled and fell into the empty bucket under the operating table. Gretel explained calmly. Even if the blood vessel is broken, don't be afraid. The most taboo thing on the operating table is panic. The largest blood vessel in the lungs is the pulmonary artery, and the blood volume of the pulmonary artery is completely incomparable to that of the aorta. Immediately clamp the pulmonary artery, block the blood flow, and use therapeutic techniques to seal the blood vessels. It's too late. Don't be afraid. In fact, even if there is no treatment, it is still possible to apply pressure with gauze and suture immediately. Greet always remembers that on the day he was promoted to deputy director, his colleague who was promoted to deputy director happily told him that he had undergone a lung cancer operation. The pulmonary artery was ruptured, and the blood rushed out on the spot. Fortunately, I reacted quickly. I pressed it down with my fingers. Even gauze could not be used. Don't rush to sew at this time. If the pressure is too much, it will come out of the needle hole. It came out so fast. Only with the path blazed by our predecessors can our descendants be able to do so with ease. As Greet explained, he carefully removed the lung segment containing the tumor. According to the principles of lung cancer surgery, he should have removed the entire lung lobe, whichever lobe had the tumor, all of which lung lobe should be removed. However, with the targeted killing of cancer cells, he could try cutting out only one lung segment and cleaning the other parts with targeted killing. Up and down, clean them one by one, and then clean them again. Then, throw in a limb regeneration and let the unlucky new lung segment grow out. The lungs, unlike the liver, do not have such a strong regenerative capacity. 1/3, 1/2 of the liver is cut off, or even in extreme cases, only the tail lobe of the liver is left, and it can still grow back slowly to the size of a whole liver. But the lungs are not good. If they are cut off, they will be cut off. They will never grow back, and the lost respiratory function will never be replaced. Of course, some of the extraordinary races in this world have relatively strong regenerative abilities. For example, the ogre can slowly regrow an arm if it is cut off, and the two-headed ogre can regrow even if its head is cut off. But Frost Giant, Gretel had never heard of such a strong regeneration ability. Even if he was a frost giant with the blood of the white dragon, Gretel didn't want to bet on his lung regeneration ability. Since Gutierrez has grand ideals and hopes to become a legend one day, Gretel decided to help him. If a piece of lung is missing and the oxygen uptake capacity is reduced, ordinary people may be able to make do with it, but for top athletes, including top fighters, it will completely cut off their upward path. The right lung was cut out, treated, regrown, ventilated, and recruited. Then, turn the patient to one side and continue, there's still the left hilum. In the previous life, there would be no need for surgery for such a large area of metastasis. If the tumor invaded a wide area, one side of the lung might have to be removed, and there would be metastases on both sides. This, it would be impossible to remove. Okay. Is the operation finished? Several heads poked their heads in to look. Unlike the last abdominal surgery, for lung surgery, the person was lying on his side so that the healthy side of the lung could open as much as possible. Everyone had to gather around to watch. Gretel didn't look back and snorted angrily. It's still early. All the lymph nodes around the lungs need to be cleaned. There are at least 50 lymph nodes, and then there are the mediastinum, right axillary lymph nodes, and cervical lymph nodes. And their surroundings. All need to be scanned. This is such a big project, even if there were spells, Gretel would not dare not to dig them out one by one and clean them one by one. One lymph node per minute takes an hour, and a large area of axillary lymph nodes is involved. The thyroid and breast surgery department next door basically performs a breast cancer resection and will also remove the armpit lymph nodes. At least 10 to 15 lymph nodes must be removed. He patiently cleaned out all the lymph nodes. As for whether these removed lymph nodes will affect human immunity in the future, then leave it alone. A half-step legendary warrior has a physical constitution of 19 or not 20, which is basically equivalent to being immune to all poisons and diseases. If dozens of lymph nodes are removed, it's not a big problem, maybe they can regenerate. This operation took almost as long as the previous operation, and Greed was exhausted after the operation. Moreover, the effect of this operation was not as good as the previous one. After Gutierrez woke up, he turned his head left and right, moved his arms, and moved his back. Then, he lowered his waist and sat on his horse again, shouted loudly, and punched with all his strength. Woo cough 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 cough. Greed stared at him worriedly. Gutierrez bent over, pressed his chest, breathed for a long time, and began to frown. How many lungs did you cut out of me? My chest hurts. I cut 2 lung segments, about 1/9 of the lungs, and used the limb regeneration spell to grow them on you. Maybe the new lungs are a bit fragile. It's true, I feel pain in my chest when I take a breath to the limit. These areas need to be cultivated and practiced slowly. It is estimated that within a year and a half, it will not be possible to practice to the original level. There's no rush, you can take your time to recover. I don't want to rush you. You have to advance to the legendary level, and all your organs need to be properly conditioned. Take a good rest for a while, and there's still a third surgery, those bones in your body. Lumbar spine. Pelvis. Femur. All are big bones, all are very complex bones, all are very important to the human body and need to bear weight. Gretel has seen the CT scan. These bones are severely corroded, and many places have become honeycombs. How long will it take for bones that have been corroded like this to grow? Do we need to use special methods? There is no bone cement in this damn place. Is it enough to rely solely on guided treatment to make it grow? Greed struggled for a long time, so he had to ask people and do experiments first. This time, it was still the necromancer who answered the fastest. You can use spells to corrode the bones first. Then, dispel the corrosion and use healing spells to guide its growth. There are so many corrosive spells in the necromancy department. Any kind will do. It doesn't matter how serious the corrosiveness is. We are familiar with this. We are best at playing with bones. With the support of the necromancer, Gretel can have as many bones as he wants. He wants to corrode until a layer of bone skin is removed, he wants to corrode until the marrow is gone, he wants to corrode until he has a honeycomb shape. If you want to toss the pelvis, just toss the pelvis. If you want to toss the lumbar spine, just toss the lumbar spine. If you want to toss the femur, the left side, the right side, the femoral body, the greater trochanter of the femur, whatever you want. Gretel forgot all about food and sleep and worked on it for 7 days in a row. Under the guidance of the magic, the newly grown bones may have some problems with bone density and bone strength, but first of all, the CT scan will not show up numb and bumpy like before. Okay. 7 days later, another major surgery. Gretel was so exhausted that he finally repaired all the bone metastases on the frost giant's body, and then scanned his whole body to remove as many cancer cells as possible. It's basically sorted out. You can rest and recuperate, half a year, whatever you want. In short, whether it's guarding the mage tower or cleaning the dragon cave, I won't need you for the time being. Master. I will be yours from now on. My whole body is yours. Whatever you want me to do, I will do it. I can even die for you." The frost giant fell to the ground. Gretel took a few steps back amid the noise that sounded like a magnitude 3 earthquake. "No. Stay away from me. I haven't showered in a few days and this smells like this. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right?" Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1802. A case of half-step legendary warrior undergoing radical resection of multiple metastatic tumors. A fleshy, white, and delicate hand opened the new issue of Life and read the above content. Half-step legendary warriors, because of their strong vitality and ability to endure pain, some diseases often develop to a particularly advanced stage in them. The author recently cured a case of a half-step legendary warrior with multiple metastatic tumors. The tumors were multiple in the lungs, liver, intestines, lumbar spine, femur, pelvis, etc., but the patient still retains the ability to move and has a strong fighting capacity. The owner of the hand snorted softly. He curled his fingers, landed on the corner of the journal, and made a small half-moon-shaped mark. "He's winning over people again, hateful pagans, hateful devils, always have all kinds of ways to win over people, who knows if I'm suffering like this because of ungodliness. Hey, I still have to keep watching." The author of this paper seems to understand the reader's knowledge level very well. He changes his writing style and first explains the definition of tumor. Cells that are mistakenly replicated in the body, have extremely tenacious vitality. They will steal a large amount of nutrients from the body and divide and grow rapidly. Because they are part of the cells in the body, traditional treatments are often ineffective and will promote their accelerated growth. Are traditional treatments ineffective? Promote accelerated growth? The owner of the hand snorted again. After humming, he did not continue to rebuke the abominable infidels. Instead, he followed the explanation behind tumor and went to read the journals he received a few years ago and review them again. Tumor, the definition of a tumor, the characteristics of tumor cells, the way to kill tumors in a targeted manner. Ah, I really didn't pay attention to this paper before. So the older you get, the higher your chance of getting this, cancer? These nameless swellings and pains, nameless weakness, pain here and there, many of them, are they all cancer? He couldn't help but touch himself. The bright red cassock shook slightly, and the gold thread on the cuff seemed to have dimmed a lot. Speaking of which, he is also 89 years old. Recently, he has always felt that something is not right with him. He has difficulty breathing. Sometimes when the weather changes, or he drinks too much, he can't help but cough up blood. What's more important is that the treatment does not make the situation better. Instead, you will feel more stuffy in your chest and even more difficult to breathe. After being treated twice, he didn't dare to treat him anymore, but if he didn't dare to treat it, it might be worse. Targeted tumor killing. He muttered, turning the ring on his thumb over and over, from the inside to the outside, and then from the outside to the inside. On the finely carved emerald ring, complex patterns flashed and flashed, as if a human face was about to float out of the seal ring. Does this make sense? If I really have tumors on my body and these tumors are removed, is it possible for me to take another step? Every time I want to hit the advanced level, I feel that I am not good at all. Comfortable. Faith is important, but advancement is also important. If we don't advance, how can we better serve the Lord and better display the Lord's glory? What's worse is that, in theory, as long as you are pious enough, you will not get sick, and as long as you are pious enough, your illness will definitely be cured. If a priest of the glorious Holy See, a high-level healer of the glorious Holy See, can't even do anything about his own illness, then his faith is probably very questionable. Or maybe he's possessed by the devil. Stained with the devil's filth. So, Is there any way that I can find out whether the pain in my body is actually a tumor? Only by understanding can we make further judgments on how to treat it. Compared to the clergy of the glorious Holy See, the nobles of the Kingdom of Kent have much less hesitation. The Duke of Cornwall read Gretel's newly issued paper from cover to cover and immediately drove to the royal capital. When I came to the royal capital, I directly found the leader of the royal mage group, Archmage Lafayette Seymour. I hope I can get it checked. I suspect it's because I have a tumor on my body, so I've been stuck at the half-step legend level and can't jump up. Where can I get checked? Where can I get treatment? Master Seymour has just finished reading the new issue of Life and has read all the preambles against the cited documents of the paper. Regarding the Duke of Cornwall, the top 10 Grand Dukes in the Kingdom of Kent, he secretly exclaimed, "Fortunately, I put Master Nordmark's works first," but the smile on his face was confident and true. The most accurate methods for tumor examination are currently the surround detection magic scan and the magnetic resonance scan. You are a half-step legend, and the monosource scanned for you must be a high-level legendary item, a mage from the royal capital. The tower doesn't. To be precise, there are still legendary items. After all, this is the royal capital. The Magic Council needs a legendary equipment and a legendary scroll to control the situation. However, there are no high-level legendary items. Out of the tacit understanding between the Parliament and the royal family, and out of consideration to avoid irritating the royal family, the Parliament's power in the capital is not too strong. The equipment and scrolls are all legendary primary. It is enough to support the royal family, but it is definitely not enough to threaten the safety of the royal family. Naturally, that would not be enough to examine the Duke of Cornwall. Then where do I need to go? Nevis, the Duke of Cornwall stroked his half-brown and half-white beard, a little impatiently. Or, go to Master Nordmark and check it out directly. If you find a tumor during the examination, do it directly. I really don't recommend that you go to Master Nordmark immediately. Archmage Seymour looked at the other party with a smile, counting 3, 2, 1 in his mind, waiting to see the Duke's face change. Mage Nordmark is currently on Dragon Island. Yes, it is the legendary Dragon Island. It is in the northernmost part of the New World. It covers an extremely large area. We estimate that it can be as big as the entire northern part of the New World. The Duke of Cornwall's cheek indeed twitched. Dragon Island, as soon as you hear the name, you know it is a very difficult place to mess with. He also has connections in the Magic Council, and he also found out that the Council has fixed projects on Dragon Island in recent years. A large number of magicians have gone there, and there are also huge airships regularly transporting supplies. However, except for the magicians who have negotiated with Long Island, the Council will not recommend, object, or be responsible for other magicians' requests to go to Long Island. If you want to go, go on your own, and you will be responsible for your own life and death. If you get into trouble that involves the Magic Council, then even if you escape by luck, the Council will hold you accountable. If you die on Dragon Island, your mage tower and family property will also be confiscated by the Council for compensation. There are formal ways to apply, but breaking into Long Island without permission is extremely risky, but no one goes there. The place on the left and right is too dangerous, and it's pointless to go if the level is too low. If your level is high enough, wait for the Dragon Island Mage Tower to recruit people. But for the Duke of Cornwall, it's more troublesome. If you really have a tumor on your body, even if it is a large-scale tumor that cannot be treated with treatment, forget it, just go for a run. If it's not actually the disease, or if you're not sick at all, why don't you go to Long Island? It took at least half a year to get rid of it. You can go to Nevis. The equipment at the Oak Grove Hospital in Nevis has been upgraded, so there should be no problem with the examination. Archmage Seymour continued to smile. Go for an examination, then send the film to Long Island, waiting for Master Nordmark to read it. By the way, although there are a few people in Nevis who can do image identification of tumors, there is no Nord mark. Master mark is accurate. A round trip from the royal capital to Nevis takes half a month even if you go quickly, and at least a month if you go slowly, and the fees are quite high, whether it is using high-level legendary items for inspection or long-distance signal transmission. This amount the money can never be lower. However, compared to a trip to Dragon Island, it is still much more convenient. The preliminary preparations can be completed in Nevis. Can I invite them over? Sorry, this really can't be done. The inspection equipment is huge and expensive. Currently, only Nevis has it. It is completely immovable, mainly because you are a half-step legend. If you are a lower level knight, you can use a lower level one. Equipment. Then please introduce me. Which archmage should I look for when I go to Nevis? Just go directly to Oak Grove Hospital. This hospital is opened by Master Nordmark. The hospital will arrange the follow-up work for you. The Duke of Cornwall let out a long sigh. It would be great if he could see a doctor in the royal capital, or if he could see a doctor in his own territory. If the examination equipment could be cheaper, maybe you could invite them to build a hospital on your own territory. You don't need it for yourself, but your family members, knights, and subordinates also need it. A few years ago, I heard from the Bishop of the God of War Temple in the territory that Oak Grove Hospital cooperated with the God of War Temple to correct the spine of high-level warriors, allowing him to relieve his pain and regain the hope of advancement. Okay. Then I'll go there. If you can relieve the pain, maybe you can advance. Just in case, he can become a legend. He has been stuck on the half-step legend for 50 years. 50 years. In recent years, there have been more and more illnesses, and it looks a lot like what the paper said. Gretel's new paper was published in the journal Life and traveled across the ocean along the path of the Magic Parliament. The Netherlands, the Kingdom of Cape Tien, under the rule of the glorious Holy See, even the Black Forest and the Orc Kingdom of the Vampire Tribe, were successively acquired. In the Black Forest, Grand Duke Rimmer was flipping through the new issue of papers, his eyes were red, and there was a ghostly fire in his eyes. You can actually operate on half-step legend. Does being able to operate on half-step legend mean that you can operate on me? I also feel uncomfortable here and there. Do you want to go and have a look? Grand Duke, please be careful. We are a vampire. Our bodies are different from humans. It's hard to say whether we will get cancer. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1803. Don't vampires get cancer? Definitely not. Our body was once the body of a living person, it's the body of a living person, so it's possible to have cancer cells, right? But, this paper says that cancer cells are more likely to grow the older you are. How old were we when we became vampires? 20. 25. Naturally, a very young person, with a young body, a young soul, and a bright and beautiful face, can be selected by the parents to be given true blood and become a vampire. Those who are a little older, or those who are not very qualified, or not very handsome, can only be blood slaves. The older ones, the poorer ones, and the uglier ones cannot even become blood slaves. They are either accidentally sucked to death by blood, or they spend their entire lives in poverty and misery as serfs under the rule of the Black Forest. These subsequent statements flashed through the hearts of the vampires who stood respectfully in front of Grand Duke Rimmer. However, it was difficult for him to say these words, and it was difficult for him to say a word. He could only listen to the Grand Duke continue. Although we have been undead for so many years, when we drink blood, when we repair our bodies after being injured, our bodies are still alive, right? We can still grow, right? However, you have no idea whether this kind of growth is the same as a living body, or whether it is an undead creature growing under the accumulation of negative energy. The young vampire still didn't dare to say a word, and listened to Grand Duke Rimmer's words with open ears. Anyway, go check it out, there will always be no problem. Go and ask, send a message over there, help me ask, how to check, how to get treatment. It is still convenient to communicate with the Magic Council. In the past few years, the vampires had sent envoys to the Magic Council and had joined forces to fight a war. The victory was quite generous. Although there is no mage tower in the Black Forest, if you go all the way north from the Black Forest and run thousands of miles to the barbarian territory in the wilderness, there is the mage tower, running thousands of miles. What does it mean to the strong? When they get to the mage tower over there, the magicians can naturally send messages to Nevis. It was still relatively difficult at first. Magical messaging was extremely expensive. A short message of less than 20 characters would burn an entire medium-sized crystal. The crystal is naturally the responsibility of the vampires. Whoever wants to send a message will be responsible for the crystal. But in recent years, magicians have developed something called electromagnetic communication, which can convey a very long message at a very low cost. Although it is still not possible to transmit images, nor is it possible to transmit entities, the transmission of text and sound has been very smooth, and it is quite cheap. Each transmission only requires a low-grade crystal, or 1/20th of a medium-grade crystal. 1. The request of Grand Duke Rimmer was conveyed on the same day, and on the third day, Nevis's opinion was fed back. Whether the vampires will get tumors will only be known after examination. If the Grand Duke is interested, he can go to Nevis and we will specially arrange the examination. You ask for the cost? Magnetic resonance has 5,000 contribution points and rotating magic scanning. The Grand Duke is a half-step legend and needs to use high-level legendary equipment as a magic light source, which also has 5,000 contribution points. Puncture biopsy, each site contributes 500 points. The high-level mage stationed in the mage tower took out a piece of paper and read it straight down. While reading, he shook his hand, and a magic imprint fell on the paper, so that the messenger could take it back for delivery. If the examination results are interpreted by a healer in Nevis, there will be no additional charge, but the accuracy may not be very high. If it is interpreted by Master Nordmark himself. How about it? The young vampire subconsciously stretched his neck, hoping to see the words on the paper in advance. The magician didn't feel dissatisfied, so he lowered the paper and let him read. Because all of this information is images, and they are very large and very complex images. They are sent to Master Nordmark through the Mage Tower network. The information transmission fee is 10 high-grade crystal stones. Of course, the Grand Duke can also go to Dragon Island by himself and meet Master Nordmark. However, we cannot guarantee whether we can get permission from the Dragon clan. The young vampire ran back in dismay and asked the Grand Duke for instructions. Grand Duke Rimmer was very troubled and instructed his subordinates to continue asking. If it is confirmed that treatment is needed, can I go to Long Island? Can I get permission? This is fine. If it is confirmed that there is a disease that needs to be treated, Master Nordmark, in the name of the Mage Tower, can guarantee that the patient will come here for treatment. As long as you abide by the rules of Dragon Island, you don't have to worry about being shot down before you even get to the island. That's Dragon Island. The Dragon clan always looks askance at the Vampire clan. If they, vampires, want to go to Dragon Island, they basically have to risk being burned to ashes. Even if you can walk around and take a look openly, you should pay some money. 10,000 contribution points are only 40,000 gold coins. What's wrong with that? It's just a bit of pain. I haven't started the treatment yet, and the examination alone costs 40,000 gold coins, so the cost of treatment probably doesn't start at 400,000. This money was not provided by the Grand Duke alone, but by their family. The Grand Duke spent more, and they spent less. And this is living money. Living money. A sum of money is spent and given to Nevis. In the next few years, the money they spend on buying various medicines, various cultivation materials, magic equipment, and even high-level blood slaves will all be deducted. The heart of the young vampire who was ordered to inquire about the information and negotiate the price was trembling. He himself is an earl, and his status in the family is neither high nor low, neither above nor below. He can get such a small supplement by relying on the favor of the Grand Duke. However, if all the money in the Grand Duke's hands is used for examination and treatment, then his advanced expenses this year, next year, and in the next few years. If the Grand Duke is sure to go, the council has a suggestion. The presiding mage of the Mage Tower added with a smile. He is 85 years old and is at level 14. He has been stuck at level 14 for 15 years before accepting the commission from the council and coming here. Although it is far away from Nevis and still has to squat in the wilderness, it is a great thing to be able to monopolize a mage tower with rich energy, and the council can provide high subsidies. Many experiments that were previously impossible or unavailable can now be done. Of course, in such a wilderness far away from the Parliament headquarters, the surrounding forces are complex, including vampires, barbarians from the wilderness, and electors from the Rhine Kingdom who are subordinate to the glorious Holy See. The presiding mage must also have some political sensitivity. This high-level mage also obtained the qualification to host this mage tower after going through talks and assessments in the Parliament. He will naturally pay more attention to the needs around him. At this moment, he smiled all over his face and added to the young vampire. "That's it? I have a batch of supplies here, as well as a few promising young people, who are going to be sent to Nevis. There are also several patients in the surrounding areas who are going to Nevis together. If the Grand Duke is willing to escort him, for a moment." Before he finished speaking, the young vampire, Earl Grodd, frowned tightly. Young people? Youth means a vigorous body and a fresh and fragrant soul. If young people are evaluated as promising by high-level mages, the fragrance in their souls may be more obvious. Of course, the Grand Duke may not be selective about food, but what if the mood strikes? Are there patients in surrounding areas? To the north are the barbarians, the noble and elegant vampires, who really hate these uncivilized guys who are full of stench. To the west is the Duchy of Saxony. They have been fighting ping-pong-pong with the Blood Clan for hundreds of years. It is hard to say that the two sides have developed a lot of hatred. What if there are still people to the east who want to hitchhike? What if there are still orcs? What about other people whose identities are hard to say? Of course, this depends on the wishes of the Grand Duke and the wishes of the nearby patients. The Archmage smiled. However, if the Grand Duke can safely escort them to Nevis, the Parliament is willing to reduce the inspection fee by half. If they want to go to Dragon Island, the Parliament will negotiate with the Dragon Clan and there will be more tangible evidence. For example, the Grand Duke obeys the rules. We are willing to cooperate. After traveling thousands of miles in the wilderness, he was able to safely escort these people to their destination when faced with beings weaker than him. Therefore, it is okay to let him have a little freedom on Dragon Island, right? Earl Grodd instantly came up with a lot of valid reasons. He breathed a sigh of relief and bowed gracefully. "Thank you for your advice. I will convey it to the Grand Duke for you and follow his instructions. It would be great if the Grand Duke would agree. Half the cost of the inspection. 20,000 gold coins. It would be better if the treatment costs could also be reduced. It is said that the Nordmark mage is willing to use various reasons to reduce the treatment costs for patients." He ran back again to deliver the news to the Grand Duke. The Grand Duke pondered for a long time, drank 2 glasses of blood, and tapped the crystal glass. "Let's find out who wants to go together. If there's no one I hate too much, I'll just take them with me." In the end, a group of 20 people were able to go on the road together. 3 young mages will return to the council for rotation and receive new training. The 5 magician seedlings collected nearby were not safe under the rule of the glorious Holy See and had to be sent to Nevis. The 3 high-level spellcasters from the surrounding barbarian tribes are all very old, and it is obvious at a glance that they all have ailments. 3 old warriors from the Saxony territory, 2 orcs, and actually 2 ascetics from the glorious Holy See. Grand Duke Rimmer looked at this team, and then at Earl Grodd who was with him. Veins were twitching on his forehead. So I'm responsible for the safety of so many people. In such a mixed team, many people look like they have a grudge. If you just leave it alone, they will fight on their own. Need more money. This month's monthly pass is ready. Happy. I'll be back in 4,000 word mode tomorrow, so I can save up some manuscripts and go watch a movie. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Giolan 2020. Chapter 1804. Naturally, it is not possible to add money, and the high-level mage sitting in the mage tower does not have this authority. What's more, the strongest expert in this group of people gathered, excluding Grand Duke Rimmel, was an old orc. The Grand Duke saw that the power of his movements was at level 15. Level 15, even a seriously ill level 15, is enough to walk proudly in most big cities and become the guest of a duke or marquis. Asking Grand Duke Rimmer to help take care of this team is just to guard against the attack of experts who exceed expectations, and to balance the forces of all parties. After all, orcs, barbarians, vampires, local knights, and priests of the glorious Holy See. Without a super powerful master to control them, they would start fighting every minute. However, if there is a master, they can't fight even if they cough. In this way, the Grand Duke actually didn't have much to do. After entering the Netherlands, it could be said that there was almost no danger. And there is nothing to do, and there is no price to pay, so I can only follow the crowd and walk slowly. Moreover, he had to lower his speed and accommodate those guys with the lowest levels. 5 good seedlings found locally, 2 from the White Wolf territory, 2 from the Saxony territory, and the remaining 1 even ran away from the territory of Archbishop Corona, one of the 7 electors. They are all self-taught. The age is generally under 25 years old, and the grades are 1 to 3. Although it is still very low, and far lower than the average level of mages in Nevis, in the magic desert of the old continent, under the nose of the glorious Holy See, to be able to achieve such a level is already very impressive. Grand Duke Rimmer occupied the innermost table of the tavern, enduring the noise and vulgar laughter and shouting in the tavern, feeling full of impatience. From this table, 2 orcs occupied the second table, and the barbarians occupied the third table. They were all holding wooden cups as big as their heads and drinking wine as hard as they could. The 2 old knights and the 2 clergymen of the glorious Holy See were whispering to each other. Are you going to Nevis for medical treatment? Yes, the injuries I suffered in the early years still cause pain in my waist and legs. When the weather changes, I feel pain everywhere. My family said, send me to have a look. What if it can be solved? What about you? You want to go too? Yes, the younger female cleric hammered her waist with her backhand, showing a little pain on her face, but soon turned firm. Not only do I want to get treatment, but if possible, I also want to study there for a while. Their treatment methods are very special, and many of us can't do it. Won't the Holy See punish you? The old knight frowned worriedly. Grand Duke Rimmel also pricked up his ears. Will the priests of the glorious Holy See also go to Nevis to learn new healing techniques? If this is the case, it means that more and more priests are turning to the Magic Council, and the foundation of the Holy See has been shaken. I have left the Holy See. The female cleric raised her head and smiled. I really can't stand them. They are not allowed to help mothers, not allowed to relieve them from the pain of childbirth, and treat pain as their sin. Obviously many sisters can survive, obviously many sisters do not have to suffer so much bitter. As a nun in a convent, she was not allowed to get married, let alone have children, so she never suffered the pain of childbirth. However, she has also seen the effects of various childbirths on nursing noble women, nursing women who are pregnant and giving birth, and even going to towns and villages to help poor women in order to glorify the Lord of Glory. Danger and pain. And these dangers, these pains, they are not allowed to intervene in advance, not allowed to help, not allowed to save. This is their sin. It is the sin they were born with. It is clearly written like this in the scriptures. If she was still in the system of the glory Holy See, she would not dare to take a step beyond the limits. Reprimanded, excommunicated, deprived of holy power, or even directly burned on the stake, the fate of the seniors was clearly laid out there. However, the so-called my faith belongs directly to the Lord, and my strength comes directly from the Lord. After accepting this idea, she resolutely walked out of the monastery and came to the north. Her strength has not diminished and she is freer to do what she wants and gain more knowledge about Caesarean section. But she still felt that it was not enough. She wanted more and wanted to know more. Grand Duke Rimmer closed his eyes slightly and nodded slightly. Human beings, this is human beings. No matter what theory or oppression, they cannot suppress their desire to pursue life and reduce suffering. Their vitality is like weeds. Even if they are burned out by fire, or even if the ice and snow cover them for a whole winter, they will still rush to emerge the next day. What about you? On the other side of the square table, another old knight and an old priest with white hair and beard were also whispering. You came from the territory of the Archbishop of Trier. Are you really not afraid of the collapse of your faith when you accept other people's healing techniques? What's there to be afraid of? The old priest smiled proudly. A disease is a disease, and treatment is treatment. If you are not as good at treatment as others, you are not as good as others. If you are not as good as others, just learn it. Moreover, there are some diseases that cannot be cured through treatment, or can only be cured through treatment. Some of the things written in the paper I can understand, and some I cannot understand. The paper I got is too not enough. He sighed in annoyance. No matter how strict the Holy See is on guard, it does not prevent the real high-level officials from regularly obtaining papers from the Magic Council. However, his level is not high enough, not to mention that the ascetic monks are already outside the core of the Holy See. The papers I got were one in the east and one in the west, but they couldn't be put together. All he can do is to speculate, practice, and learn. Anyway, I am an ascetic monk. I occasionally disappear for a year or two, and they can't find me. Besides, I have learned it, and I have used it to help the people of the Lord of Glory. Isn't that adding to the glory of the Lord? Just be happy. Grand Duke Rimmel pouted secretly. Human beings can really find reasons for their own thoughts. In order to achieve their wishes, they will use various methods to convince themselves, even if it is to sell the Sisters of Radiance to the Black Forest. In comparison, these priests who traveled thousands of miles to Nevis to receive treatment and learn new healing techniques, well, are they relatively moral? The new treatment technique is obviously very attractive to these visitors from far away. In addition to several priests, the barbarian shaman was also whispering to the orc general. Can we learn this thing? Can we send someone to learn it? I'm already able to heal half-step legends, send a healer to learn. If you can learn it, we'll never be short of treatment here. Yes, this is the power shown by being able to cure half-step legend. At this point, Master Nordmark's healing technique can finally be said to be independent and unique. However, as long as they show an open attitude, more and more forces will naturally turn to the Magic Council, or at least show a friendly attitude. Who doesn't want to have a place where they can save lives when all the doctors are helpless? Who wouldn't? It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, Right. Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 1805. After nearly 2 months of stumbling, a group of patients with complex composition, different species, and indescribable positions and thoughts finally arrived in Nevis. The moment he disembarked from the boat and landed, Grand Duke Remer let out a long sigh, feeling exhausted physically and mentally. He would never take on this kind of job again next time. No matter how much money is offered, I won't accept it. More than 2,000 miles. If he was rushing alone, it would be there in 5 or 6 days. Even if he didn't rush, it would be there in 10 days and a half. Under extreme circumstances, with the help of various expensive magical means, it can be reached in 2 or 3 days. Why did he put up with these people for nearly 2 months? The lowest level magician in the team, level 1, can only summon a magic horse, and ride on it. Of course, the speed cannot be increased, and stability is better than stability. A level 5 mage can summon a whole team of magic horses, so the weird mounts brought over by barbarian wizards and orc warriors can be stored at the border, so that they won't scare people when they come in, but they won't be as fast. Naturally, he, the great Grand Duke of Remer, is extremely accomplished in magic. He can summon a whole team of phantom ponies to take everyone across mountains and rivers, saving at least half the time. But why? No one gave him any extra money for this matter. He would rather slowly grind with this group of people than waste his precious strength on taking people with him who have nothing to do with him. He is not the nanny, servant, or groom of these people. Fortunately, this boring journey is finally over. Grand Duke Remer stepped onto the trestle, passed by the magician who came specially to greet him and smiled at him, and went straight forward. It was already dark, and the entire port was still brightly lit, which made him feel a little uncomfortable. Why is it lit like this? It's already late at night, so you should just sleep well. Even if you light a lamp or sway a few candles, you can see your feet clearly and avoid crashing. As for being as bright as day, it's so unfriendly to the vampires. Last time the vampire envoy came, Nevis was not like this. And it's noisy. It's so noisy. The whole dock was filled with rumbling noises, which tortured the vampire's keen hearing. On every ship, as long as it was properly berthed, someone had moved a huge mechanical device aboard, making it roar, roar, and turn desperately. Those cargo ships lined up and parked under the high iron shelves. Huge hooks hung from the iron shelves and hooked the goods on them. They made a huge and terrifying sound and started to move to lift the goods ashore. It's noisy everywhere, noisy, noisy. The quiet, dark, and beautiful nights he liked were all gone. Everything is destroyed, hurry up. He was not in a very beautiful mood, his clothes were windy, and he walked forward with a dull head. The magician who came to greet him was almost left behind. He turned around and followed quickly. Your Excellency. Your Excellency, when walking this way, pedestrians must keep to the right. Your carriage is at the first exit on the right. Can the lights here be turned off? Grand Duke Remer asked in a very bad mood. The sound was extremely suppressed, somewhere between a growl and a roar. The visitor was stunned for a moment, then quickly apologized and said, "It cannot be extinguished, Your Excellency. The lighting in the port is all electric lamps, as well as pumps and cranes, all of which belong to the port's power facilities. Unless there is a total power outage, at most 1 or 2 of these lamps will explode, and they cannot all be extinguished." What about the power outage? A cloud of black energy had already formed around the fingertips of Grand Duke Remer. The magician responsible for greeting him didn't panic, and his smile grew wider. Thunderhorn is responsible for maintaining all the power facilities in the port, you see. The background of the Thunderhorn is His Excellency the Lord of Thunder, a third-level legend. The Lord of Thunder has a disciple who is the one he seeks medical treatment from this time, Master Nordmark. 1 or 2 lights exploded. This is a natural phenomenon and cannot be blamed on anyone. Right now, there is a magician carrying a tool bag and flying up using the levitation technique to inspect the lights that have just blown out. However, if you just want to kill these electrical facilities with a wave of your hand just because you are a little unhappy about being photographed, there is no need to think about whether the Lord of Thunder will come to hunt him down, let alone cure him. The situation was stronger than the people. Grand Duke Rimmer only had to cover himself with a layer of black mist and move forward in dismay. Fortunately, the port was well planned, and we didn't go far before we reached an exit and boarded the carriage. The bad news is that even after getting on the carriage, I still can't speed up. The carriage was not much faster than walking in the crowded traffic. Grand Duke Rimmer endured for a quarter of an hour, then became impatient again. Can't we fly? I mean, with my status, can't I even fly? Of course I can fly. The visitor's smile did not change. Dear sir, according to the rules of the Parliament, high-level mages, or other professionals of the same level, have the right to fly. Naturally, you also have the right. We have applied for you before you arrive in Hong Kong. But dash. He stretched out his hand and said. But you have to leave the no-fly zone. The port is a no-fly zone. You cannot fly unless you have special permission. Please wait for a while. The port is an important area and flights are not allowed, which is understandable. Grand Duke Rimmer waited patiently for another quarter of an hour, finally sailed out of the port area, and took off impatiently. Someone stayed with him, giving guidance as he flew. Let's fly lower, there is an emergency on the upper level, and we need to make way for them. This is the heavy industrial area, there is also a no-fly zone over there. Remember, you can't fly around, here too no. Let's come down. Are you going to the ground again? Grand Duke Rimmer frowned. He had already seen an upright mage tower in front of him, with a red cross shining brightly on the top, which was the logo of Oak Grove Hospital. It's almost here, why can't it fly over immediately and land a mile away? Is there a no-fly zone around Oak Grove Hospital? So, what about over there? He pointed casually. In the distance, a flying carpet with red, blue, and white lights on its top was flying rapidly toward the hospital. There is a human figure lying in the center of the flying carpet. On the top of the flying carpet, a magician is kneeling and shouting. Difficult labor. Massive bleeding. Prepare for blood tests and rescue. Hurry. Accelerating all the way, the surrounding flyers and nightbirds exploded to make way for him. After a moment, another loud roar sounded in the hospital. The ladle of Morning Star steel plant capsized. More than 10 people were injured or killed. Help! Whisking, a few rays of light flew up from the hospital and towards the heavy industrial area where they came from. Around Oak Grove Hospital, no one is allowed to fly except for transporting emergency patients and healers setting out to rescue patients. Sir, I'm sorry, let's go slowly, shall we? I finished watching Oppenheimer today, I suffocated the cat to death. Nolan spent 3 hours telling a story similar to Captain Sully, which is roughly Oppenheimer accomplished a great thing, and then politicians attacked him for some boring things, and finally got rid of him. His reputation has been ruined. And the narrative is sparse. I only found out at the end that there were 2 hearings, one within the other. One was a politician framing Oppenheimer, and the other was the politician who framed Oppenheimer. He was caught framing Oppenheimer and held a hearing to prevent him from entering the cabinet. It makes people dizzy. The cat wants to watch the merit and the unexpected to wash his eyes. How come something of such epical significance as building an atomic bomb was filmed like this?